On today's show, a post-Summer League look at the finances for the Hawks and their roster, plus the latest news, and, of course, Trae Young's extension eligible. Talk about the latest on that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2026 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday, and I want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're also on YouTube, so please like this video as you're watching it, and be sure to spread the word about the show by telling your friends and your colleagues and your family about the podcast. I appreciate all the support, and we'll be kind of diving in now to the post-Summer League landscape for the Hawks. I'll have guests lined up as well, but today kind of a news catch-up, some topics that have been bubbling under the surface the last couple weeks while games were happening and transactions were happening in Summer League, etc. And we will get to Trae Young's extension talks later on in the podcast. But first, I think it was kind of time, after a bunch of questions that I got, for an overall look at the money, the finances, the salary cap, the luxury tax situation for the Hawks, because there's lots of questions about like what they can still do, what they're allowed to do, where they are with their mony, and that stuff does matter. So I always give this caveat, but I know that it would be nice in some ways if the money didn't matter, but it just does in the NBA. This is a cap-driven league in a lot of ways. There's lots of machinations and exceptions and ceilings and aprons, all these things you have to navigate. And I understand that people don't want to always dive all the way into it. I try to do the nerdy stuff on occasion rather than all the time, but it matters, and the Hawks have some interesting stuff to discuss. So in the last couple of weeks, some of the details rolled in. Number one, on the Nickeil Alexander-Walker contract. I never broke down the actual contract when it was signed, sealed, delivered, and entered into the NBA database, for it's now available to be seen. It's a total value on Alexander-Walker for his contract of 4 years and about $60.6 million. That was roughly what was also reported. It was kind of in that range anyway. But the interesting part about this is that he actually starts a little bit higher, then goes down and goes back up. So in year one, it's about $15.16 million. Then it goes down to $14.4 million in the second year, which is 26-27. Then back up to that $15.16 million range in year three, which is 27-28. And that's followed by the widely reported player option in 28-29 for about $15.9 million. If you recall, I initially thought that the Hawks might just sign Alexander Walker outright without having to trade for him, given that the total value that was reported could have fit in the mid-level exception. But this structure meant that they actually had to trade for him, which they did do, and give up a small asset to do so, because he makes more than the mid-level actually was allowed to make in year one of the contract. Then it goes down and then back up again. So why would the Hawks do this? Well, there's lots of reasons, but I would say for flexibility reasons. They know, for one example, probably the most prominent example, that Dyson Daniels is going to be making a lot more money next year than he is going to be coming on this coming season. So some extra wiggle room. It's only like $2 million extra room, but still that matters on the whole team building exercise. You got uncertainty with Trae Young. We'll talk about later on in this podcast. All of that said, there's some value in having it start a little bit higher this year and then go down and then back up again. But the overall analysis on that contract, by the way, on Nickeil is that it's a good contract for a good player. He will never actually make even 10% of the cap, which is a very valuable contract for a top 7 guy in your roster, which is what he is. The Hawks basically have 7 starters on their team. Last year, starting 5 plus Porzingis and Alexander Walker are all those guys are all starting caliber players. And to have any of them locked into a non-rookie deal for less than 10% of the cap is a good idea, and that's where actually where he is right now. In fact, at the end, it's going to be like 8.5% of the cap, which is very appetizing, particularly if he could kind of just hold up his value, not even improve, just kind of be the guy he has been the last 2 years, would be more than enough to kind of provide value on that contract. Anyway, from there, I realized I hadn't talked about that yet, so I wanted to lead with that. But as far as like where things stand, I will answer a bunch of questions kind of in this answer, not necessarily one at a time, but as far as where the overall money stands, for this purpose, I'm actually going to include in pencil the league minimum for Caleb Houston. If you missed it, I did a podcast on Caleb Houston's reported signing at the end of last week Also on yesterday's show, I broke down Keaton Wallace's re-signing with the Hawks. That one is actually official. Caleb Houston is not official at this moment, plus the latest from Summer League and all of that. So let's listen to those shows for sure. But just to put it out there, I am penciling in Houston for the minimum on his contract. If you include him, the Hawks have 14 guys under their standard NBA contracts, and they add up to about $184.68 million for this year. Then they have, of course, the 3 two-ways. Those guys do not count against the cap, so they're kind of in their own bucket. But 14 guys, a little bit under 185 in total money for this coming season, if you include Houston, and also if you kind of go ahead and guarantee the money for V. Krejci and Mo Gay as expected. That is about $3.2 million under the luxury tax line with one roster spot available. When they had 3 spots left, probably 2 weeks ago now, I noted on the show that they're going to be kind of close to basically be up against the tax if they tried to sign 3 veteran minimum players. But instead of doing that, they signed Nikola Juricic using the second round exception to the rookie minimum in year 1. And the rookie minimum is about $1 million less compared to the tax than the veteran minimum. So that saved them $1 million basically in the short term. And long story short, the Hawks can now sign any player in the entire league to the veteran minimum and be under the tax. I think at this point in time, the assumption should be, and really that has been the case the entire time, but at least there was a chance at one point they might go over. But now it would stun everyone if they were to go over the tax. So they can sign anyone who's still a free agent in the league. They can also trade for a player on the minimum. That would all also still apply. But there's some older guys like Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon, guys who've been in the league for 8, 9 plus years who actually make more than $3 million a year on the minimum, but the NBA prorates minimum contracts. So they all cost the same for the team. It's about, $2.something million, $2.3 million, and the league pays the difference. So keep that in mind. The Hawks can now relatively comfortably sign any player to the minimum if they want to, and then still be under the tax for next year. So as far as the roster is concerned, I've discussed it before. I'll probably get into it in deep dive fashion later on, maybe this week or next week, kind of a roster reset. But they had their 7 kind of penciled in starting caliber players. They have their 8th guy in Luke Kennard. They have some young guys. You got Buffkin, you've got Asa Newell, you've got Mo Gay, you've got V. Krejci, you've got Nikola Juricic. Like, they have an interesting bit of depth on this roster. Then you have your 2-ways, and they have 1 spot available. And that 1 spot could be filled or honestly could not be. There is some school of thought that the Hawks could wait and leave the spot open. Now, I wouldn't probably do that because there are some guys right now that if they would be willing to sign for the minimum, I would certainly like to have them. I would say headline by Al Horford, but presumably Horford's not going to be coming. That's been reported to be very likely to be Golden State. No one said for sure, but that's the projection. Same with the Anthony Melton. But there are other guys out there that I would offer the minimum to. But regardless, the Hawks can just stop right now. If they want to, they can stop right now, add nobody else, and go into the season with a legal NBA roster. 14 guys, 3 two-ways, roll from there. But they do have room to sign somebody else if they want to, and that's the money side of things. In the future, there are some questions, as we'll get into later on with Trae Young, Dyson Daniels extension. They have money committed to Jalen Johnson long-term. Dyson will probably be paid long-term, of course. Porzingis is only a 1-year contract. There's a lot of future-facing money questions and uncertainties with this roster. But in the meantime, for this year, they have 0 bad contracts, plus a lot of good players and still a little bit of flexibility as well. So a good situation to be in if you're the Hawks at this point in time. And I want to kind of lead with that at the top of the podcast. Later on, we will get into the NBA Cup and what's going on with that. That's been announced in recent days. Plus, the preseason schedule is kind of coming together, some major storylines for the future, and then we'll end with Trae Young. All that's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt just a little bit easier? With Monarch Money, it absolutely can feel easier. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, give you full visibility and control over finances. And at Monarch Money, it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place. So on top of managing your money, you're also building wealth. And that's, of course, something that we all want to do in our lives. Having your own financial tools in one place makes things easier and more convenient. So there's actually no wasting time with juggling of multiple apps. And if you're anything like me, you also might have a ton of subscriptions piled up from the past. And if Monarch Money can click this stuff up in a hurry, subscriptions can kind of cost you money monthly that you're not using. Instead, it'll be cleaned up with Monarch Money, and they will do it quickly and easily for you. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. The code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, so while I was in Las Vegas covering Summer League and the other machinations going on with the Hawks, the NBA Cup schedule and details emerged. And look, this is not the biggest deal in the world in July, but the NBA Cup made an impression locally last year because the Hawks made the run to the Final Four of the Final Cup of the NBA Cup, made the Final Four in Vegas. I was there. It was a fun spectacle. A lot of Hawks fans traveled for that. And the NBA Cup still has mixed reviews, I would say. People that like it. People that don't are not quite sold yet. I get it. It's an interesting event. It's a unique event. I tend to like it, honestly. It's just a different spin on things. The basketball is actually quite good. Teams seem to care about it in the moment. They play hard. Players show up, and they do not skip games. It's a nice product, I think. Some of the courts are a little bit loud and obviously a little bit unsightly, but I've enjoyed the kind of scene in Vegas the last couple of years, covering the NBA Cup in person, especially last year with the Hawks, and I like the event in general. It's the same format as last year, but with a new broadcast partner. In fact, Amazon is taking over as one of the main partners of the league on the TV side going into next season, along with NBC replacing TNT. ESPN's still around, but Amazon has the rights to the knockout round. So the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals are all on Amazon this time around. And the group drawings, et cetera, have been out there. So group play begins on October 31st, which is shortly after the season begins, and runs basically the entire month of November. And the quarterfinals are December 9 and 10 in the team market. Last year, the Hawks went to New York and won on the road in the quarterfinals, if you might remember this. Then the semifinals and the finals are back in Las Vegas. The semis are Saturday, December 13th. The title game is Tuesday, December 16th. I plan to be there, whether the Hawks are there or not. Hopefully the Hawks will be there for more intrigue on this podcast. The Hawks are in the same group this year with Cleveland, Indiana, Toronto, and Washington. Each group winner, of course, advances to the quarterfinals, and then there's one wild card per conference. There are 6 groups, 3 in each conference, then a one wild card in each conference as well. In group play, the Hawks host the Cavs and the Raptors, and they go on the road to Indiana and Washington. Last year, if you recall, the Hawks were in the group with Boston and Cleveland, so most people were not giving them too much of a chance to get out of the group, but they ended up winning both of those games and winning the group, which is a lot of fun to watch. Some of the fun about the NBA Cup, in my opinion, is that the small sample size format does kind of increase variance. You still want the good teams to make it far for more interest, but certainly there is a anything can happen kind of vibe to the NBA Cup, which the Hawks were part of last year. Going into this season, again, we'll save some of this for later, but the Cavs are the betting favorite to win the group. Not a surprise. They are currently the number 1 team projected by most people in the entire Eastern Conference after Boston's trade-offs and injuries, etc. For me, the Hawks are clearly the second best team in the group. The Pacers were in the finals last year. I get that, but Halliburton is, of course, out. Miles Turner is not there anymore, so not the same team. And then the Hawks are obviously better than Washington and Toronto at this point. So they have a chance to make it again. Obviously, it's so early. But backing that up, our friends at FanDuel paint a similar picture. The Hawks are plus 270 to win the group. So last year they were like 15-1. Like they were a surprise to win the group last year. This year would be far less so. It's a better Hawks team and also a worse group. That combination makes it more likely that they'll win it. Cleveland is plus 115, so almost 50-50 to win it. Indiana's plus 500, Toronto plus 550, and Washington is plus 2,100. That's a long shot to win the NBA Cup group there. And the Hawks, by the way, right now are 19-1 to win the entire NBA Cup at FanDuel. Last year they were like 100-something to 1, and they almost won it. So a different situation now, but that's the NBA Cup. It was announced, so I wanted to at least make sure I touched on that at some point, and we'll, of course, circle back around to that when we get closer and the schedule comes out. And by the way, the schedule overall usually hits in August somewhere. In fact, the preseason schedule for the Hawks is not out yet, technically. Last year, they announced it on August 7th, and they played 4 games. This year has not been announced, but there are actually 2 games that have been announced by other teams that the Hawks will be playing in. One of them is Monday, October 6th in Houston. Then they will play Houston again, actually, in Atlanta on Thursday, October 16th. That might be the last game. The opener of the season for regular season purposes for the NBA is October 21st. So it's very conceivable that that's the last game of a tune-up. Will be at home against Houston on October 16th. But if you are someone trying to plan your calendar already in advance, we know one home game for sure, and it's October 16th against Houston. Again, TBD for that. We'll get into all the schedule stuff when it comes out later on this summer. And then the rest of the podcast, some storylines I want to make sure that people kind of keep an eye on. So at the end of the last show I did yesterday on Sunday night, I kind of said, hey, we don't go away. There's plenty to talk about, and that's definitely the case. I'll have player capsules with my friend Glenn Willis. We'll be talking about all kinds of guys on the Hawks roster, digging in really deep dives into these players, what they were last year, what they will be in the future, and all of that. Plus, we have contract stuff, etc. And for me, there are 3 kind of contractual storylines for the next 3 months. One of them is Dyson Daniels, who is eligible for a rookie scale extension. Only 4 of those have happened so far this summer. 3 of the 4 have been for the max. Paolo Banchero, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren all got the max. Those are usually the ones that get done faster when the guys are making the max. There's been 1 that was not the max. There's Jabari Smith, who got 5 years and $122 million. That's kind of the Dyson range. I think I would probably guess Dyson gets more than that, but we'll see. It could be certainly somewhere in that range if it gets done. I will cover Dyson ad nauseum later on. It's kind of just a look ahead. They have until October to decide on that. They don't have to extend him. It's a year in advance. It wouldn't start till next year. All those kind of bits and bobs. But in the meantime, that's a storyline for the next 3 months. Also, Kobe Buffkin's 4th-year team option is a decision they have to make. So I talked about Kobe on the show yesterday. I'll probably do at least one more Summer League wrap-up episode with a guest. But they have until the end of October to decide on Kobe's $6.9 million team option for his 4th season. That's a real choice. That's real money, $7 million or so. They probably want to wait till camp gets going and have some preseason data in there because they don't have that much data on Kobe playing. That's the reality of the situation. And again, it's not a small amount of money. $7 million for Kobe is not exactly a no-brainer. There's another one that's actually is a no-brainer that I'm not even really going to talk about much, and that's Zachary Richeshay's 3rd-year team option. Technically, after your second season, after your first season, the team has to decide on the rookie scale deal for the 3rd season. So it's always a year in advance. This should be Zach's 2nd season, so they'll be deciding on his 3rd-year option. Let's just say that's not really a decision. It's an absolute no-brainer that the Hawks will be picking up that option. So it's not really a storyline, but they have to actually just press the button on that. But Kobe Buffkin actually is a decision. So we'll see how long they wait, what they do. It would not shock me if they decline that. It also wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. So we will see on that. But that's kind of another storyline to follow. Just want to throw that out there at this early juncture. And then there's probably the one that has already gotten the most discussion. Certainly, it's either Dyson or Trae, but I think Trae, because of the nature of Trae Young's name and pedigree and polarizing nature, all of that, his veteran extension negotiation is the biggest story from now until it actually happens or doesn't in October. And I'll get into that storyline and more in just one moment. All right, and as I said a second ago, Trae Young extension negotiations are a big, big topic. He has become eligible for an extension as of July 6th, so about 2 weeks ago. No deals done at this point in time, 15 days in. That is not surprising, nor is it inherently bad or worrying. Just noting the time frame there. I've been saying the entire time, this is not an easy negotiation. And these things take time. There is reason to believe that it could get done, but also that it may not. That's the nature of this kind of tricky negotiation. It can be up to 4 years and $229 million. That's a lot of money, obviously, to the point where I have never thought at any point that the Hawks would definitely just make that offer right away. That would be an offer that, look, I think Trae's really good. If Trae was Shea or Jokic or one of the top 5 guys in the league, that offer just sits on the table and you hope the guy signs it. Trae's in that next tier down of guys where if Trae was 23, like the first time Trae signed a max extension, it was an easy decision. Number one, it was a smaller max, 25%. Number two, he was entering his absolute prime. And that's it was a no-brainer. I said that at the time. They gave it to him right away. It was July 1st. He signed it. Bing, bang, boom, you're done. This time around, I would say the Hawks are justified in not offering the full max. They don't want to. On Trae's side, he is justified in asking for the full max. He's been that level of player. So both sides here have justifiable positions that are not exactly aligned. That's kind of my broad statement. Ante Soleil, the GM for the Hawks, basically no commented when he was asked about Trae in a nice way. Also applied the same thing to Dyson Daniels, basically a blanket statement that he's never going to discuss contracts, which, by the way, executives just have zero incentive to discuss this stuff in actual detail in public on the record. But Alex went out of his way to kind of just say, I'm not talking about this like ever. And he was nice about it. But that's also what I would do if I was him. It's just kind of no comment. There's no reason. There's nothing to add on this. You're trying to negotiate. It is what it is. But once the dead period kind of arrived a couple of weeks ago and things slowed down, there were more stories on Trae because that's trying to fill vacuum of columns and content, etc. Shams Charania talked to NBA Today on ESPN a couple of days ago, and people were asking me about that clip because it kind of made the rounds on Twitter. He said that from what he has heard, Trae Young is, quote, locked in and excited about this team, end quote. And then he also believes in the team. He's excited. I think that's what I've heard offline as well. But Shams saying that does have some weight. He also said he would not be surprised if the contract stuff gets put on hold during the season if they don't find a deal. Because this is actually unique. With Dyson, there's a deadline. It's in October. It's like, hey, this is the deadline. You either sign it or you don't. And if you don't, we have to wait till the following summer. With Trae, he's eligible the entire way through, including during the season. So they could say, hey, we'll talk to you again in December or January or whatever. We don't really know what's going to happen. That's definitely interesting. Also, Shams discussed with Malika Andrews of ESPN that Trae skipped out on a Jordan Brand event overseas to be at Summer League with his teammates in Las Vegas. That was already kind of out there, and I heard about that while I was in Las Vegas, but it was notable. Not a huge game changer, but certainly the investment that Trae has in the team. He said all the right things. All of the intel is really positive about the way Trae feels, about the way the Hawks feel about Trae. It's all very positive. So I'm sure that you'll get some sensationalized headlines and, the Hawks don't like Trae Young anymore, or Trae Young wants out. Whatever. The vibes are good from what I can hear and what I've seen, and that matters. Now, a question that came in from Weston is the following. Weston says, do the Hawks run the risk of alienating Trae Young if they try to negotiate hard with him? I love the idea of getting him a Jalen Brunson contract, but it also seems risky, end quote. So the answer is yes, there is some risk of actually negotiating instead of just giving Trae the full max and not even talking about it. Just saying, hey, here's your deal, whatever. Again, I believe the new realities of the NBA salary environment, and that's not just me, people that study this stuff better than I do, experts on the cap minutia, you can't give out full max deals to guys who are entering the kind of second half of their prime, who aren't like the top 5 players in the league. And as much as I like Trae, he isn't quite that. Like if it was Shea, if it was Jokic, you just give the deal. It is what it is. But if you're in Trae's position, there is more nuance here. Again, I am not a part of this conversation, but this is how I would look at it. Trae will make about $46 million this season, locked in. His player option for the following year is like $49 million or so. For me, to be very clear, he is absolutely worth the max. He's worth that money right now. Age 26, age 27 seasons, he is worth that much money now. Unequivocally to me, he is a max player. Now, not everyone agrees with that, but studying the league as I do, studying the way that Trae plays as I do, I think he's underrated. He's really good. And he is one of the top 20, 25 players in the league. He is a max player right now today. He's worth that in the short term. Full stop. At the same time, Trae is eligible for a 4-year deal at the max. If that happens, he would start at $51 million next year instead of player option salary, so a little bit more, and they go up from there with raises each year to more than $60 million in the final 4th season of that deal. So more than $60 million in the 29-30 season when Trae will be 31 years old. And look, there is a chance that Trae is still a max player at age 31. There's definitely a chance of that. I'm not saying otherwise. But if you look at the historical aging curve for small guards, like guys Trae's size, other than Chris Paul and maybe John Stockton, it gets pretty dicey at a certain age at that size. So Trae's going to age pretty well, I think, because he's such a great passer. He's so smart. But I would say if you're projecting, trying to be objective here, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, actually, Trae is probably not going to be quite the same player. That's probably fair to say. So keep that in mind. That matters a lot here. I will also say it's also the nature of these conversations and these deals sometimes. Sometimes you go into a deal with the face of the franchise, your central player, knowing that it may not be great at the end. That's happened many times before. Kobe Bryant's a famous one recently where they gave him this kind of balloon deal at the end. That was not a good deal for the team, but it was to make things whole with him, PR, good vibes, all of that. Trae isn't Kobe, not saying otherwise, but it's not crazy to talk about him and just give him the contract. I get that. But Ansa Saleh is a process-driven, analytical person. And I don't mean that in the analytics, quote unquote, sense. I mean, like, he thinks this stuff through. He's a planner. He's very smart about the margins of the NBA. And I think people can probably see that so far with what he's done so far around the team. I believe that if the Hawks wanted to give Trae the full 4-year max, it would already be done. I think if that deal was on the table, Trae would sign it and it would be done. But that deal's not on the table right now. I'm pretty confident in that. Again, not saying that's 100% gospel, but that's my read on the situation. But I do believe there is a middle ground. That's important. Now, I've used the Jalen Brunson comp as well. That was in the question that Weston asked a moment ago. But it's also worth noting that was a much easier negotiation than this one is for one reason. I, earlier this summer, went through the machinations of what the Hawks have been through the last 2 years. And I started with DeJounte Murray signing an extension that he wasn't supposed to sign. And by supposed to, I mean projected to sign. And on that podcast, I discussed this at length. The Hawks were in a good position in that they could offer DeJounte Murray an extension that was an underpay for him. But also, it was a spot where the Hawks could say to him in good faith, this is the most we are allowed to offer you. There's power in that. And the Knicks had the same thing with Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson could have waited one more year and signed a deal for like $100 million more. It was that big of a deal. But at that very moment, the Knicks could only offer him, it was like a 4-year deal for one something. And it was a bargain for him. Everyone knew it. It was a favor to the Knicks that he signed it. But the Knicks also could say to Jalen, hey, Jalen, we love you. This is all we're allowed to offer you. And he signed it. It'd be easier right now if the Hawks had a situation, but they don't. In Trae's case, that anchor does not exist. The Hawks can go to 4 and 229. He knows it. They know it. Everyone knows it. There's some harder negotiation because of that. So again, overall, there is some risk to trying to negotiate with the best player and the most prominent player they've had in Atlanta in 30 plus years since Dominique. That stuff does matter. The dynamics are really complicated here. But I do believe, even as someone who's quite high on Trae, the Hawks should negotiate this. They should. I would not want to give Trae 4 years and 229 right now. Do I think it's like that would be a catastrophe? No, I don't. But if you say, hey, is that a contract that you love? No, it isn't. If I'm the Hawks, I'd like to negotiate that down a little bit. Now, if Trae won't, I get that too. Like, again, this is a very nuanced, difficult spot because Trae's a max player and he knows it. But the Hawks have to think long-term, big picture, team building. And look, let's be real for a second. The Hawks have not shown the willingness, and by the Hawks, I mean ownership of the Hawks, Tony Ressler and company, have not shown the willingness to spend at a level to exceed the tax and spend big money on this team. Maybe they will in the future. I'm not ruling that out. But if you're going to start paying Trae Young that level going into his age 31 season, and you're going to also try to keep Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels and Zachary Richichet, by the way, who will also be on his second contract by then, Porzingis for the short term, all of these factors, you're going to be at some point bumping up into the tax. And if you're not willing to do that, that's an even harder sell to pay Trae what he is quote unquote worth right now, because it's going to be harder to do that long term. So long story short, he can become a free agent next summer. That's the looming domino here, is that he has a player option, he can decline it, and he can leave. It'll be his choice. And that means there's actual risk. That'd be bad for the Hawks, obviously. But there also, I will say, and this is one of those nuances too, there doesn't seem to be. So with Miles Turner, there was this weird market that just emerged from nowhere with Milwaukee. That could happen with Trae Young too. We don't know. But right now, there isn't like that very obvious suitor for him that is just looming out there. And that could still happen. But even then, the Hawks, if they wanted to, let it go till next summer, they could still offer him the most years and the most dollars as the incumbent team. So they have that anvil as well if they want to use it. All that said, there is still a real chance that it gets done this summer. I am also not surprised that it's taking a little bit of time, because it's, again, a very complicated negotiation. On one side, you have the team side. How high are they willing to go? That's basically the entire question. On Trae's side, how much would Trae consider even taking a little bit less than his max? We just don't know right now. And there's a very reasonable argument on both sides for Trae. I would say, and look, I don't like to take money away from players. I really don't, because that's just that they make the league what it is. But there's a situation what Trae is in where he's in a great spot. They've built a team around him. They've built a team that he needs around him with big wings who can defend and hide him a little bit defensively. I would say there's inherent value, even monetary value sometimes, in being the guy in a market, in a big market. And Atlanta's a big market. It is. he can still lock in more money. Like, he's obviously rich beyond my wildest dreams already, but lock in another $150, $180 million, whatever the number is, lock that in, be the guy in your market. Still, the guy, clearly, and there's value in that. So it's interesting overall. I would say one more time, as long as the vibes are reasonable, it's not a bad situation. They can kind of hopefully have a friendly, understandable negotiation. It can be nuanced. It really can. But from what I can tell, everyone's still on the same page about Trae being in Atlanta, being valued, being the guy on the team, and they're gearing up on all sides for this to be a good Hawks team this year, like the best team in several years for this team. So we'll see how this goes the rest of the summer. But that's a little bit of an overview for where we stand right now. I know it hasn't gotten done yet. I know there's been emojis. I get all that. I think there's interest, and I know there is mutual interest in him signing. It's just whether they can find the number, and if they don't, next summer becomes big. But we'll get into that later on. We'll see how this season goes and all of that. But it's one big point of nuance. I wish it was easier to discuss, but hopefully that was a good overview of what actually the situation is, and we'll get into more if the situation arises later on this summer. And by the way, it's probably the most popular topic in my mentions, in my emails, my Patreon messages. So hopefully they answer some of those questions as well. All right, everybody, that's all I have on a Monday evening into Tuesday. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And you can follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, I'll have more to come later on this week, and we'll see you all next time.